she's doing worse. I literally heard this phone call, this medical update, and got straight on a plane, like didn't even say bye to my kids because they were in school, just went. So I got there and it was, I don't know, it feels like something out of a movie. Like it's like I can replay it in my mind in slow motion. Like she was in the hospital that I was born in, and life had like truly come full circle. And my dad picked me up from the airport. My brother comes to get me so he can take me to my mom. They're going to let us go in and see her. And I can just like remember walking down the hallway with my brother. He knows the route, right? We go up the elevator 3 floors, walk down, and his steps slow, and I know I'm going to see her.
There was the last normal day, the last day that things were the way they were before they weren't anymore.
We kind of all rushed out of the house and said a quick goodbye. And, little did I know that would be the last time I hugged my mom.
He yells and tells me he's getting ready to go. He said, I'm okay. Just stay here. I'll be home in a few hours. We tell him bye and he leaves. That was the last time we ever saw him.
It's like the minute that helicopter hit the air, it just hit me what I was watching, because I knew he wasn't coming home and he knew he wasn't coming home.
For me, I took it more personally because I'm a nurse practitioner, and why can't I save him? I can help all these other people, and why can't I save him?
They're telling us that it was time, we needed to make a decision, we need to go ahead and just take him off the ventilator. And I was like, how do we know?
One thing I like to tell people is that if you lose somebody to COVID, your need to talk about the person you lost will outlast other people's desire to hear about it.
We make sure that our family members and loved ones' memories lived on. That's really important to me, is that people don't forget. I don't want to forget any of it.
So talk about them. Talk about them till people are sick of hearing about them. Because as long as you're still talking about them, they're never far away.
And the last thing that my mom said is, she said, when you get to heaven, we will look for each other.
Hello everyone, you're listening to For Those We Lost. I'm your host, Jennifer Sullivan. Thank you for being here. If you've lost a loved one to COVID and would like to share your story on the show, please send me an email. My email address is forthosewelostpodcast@gmail.com. Or go to the website forthosewelostpodcast.com and click on the contact button, and you can reach me that way as well. Also, if you'd like to help support the show, you can do that at buymeacoffee.com/forthosewelost. The link is also in the show notes. All right, let's get started with this episode. Today I'll be talking to Megan in South Carolina. Megan lost her mom, Ann Trombino, to COVID on November 12th, 2021. Megan is a mother with young children who will know their grandma through memories as they grow up. And Megan has been so changed by her mother's death that she started a nonprofit to help children who have experienced loss and hardship due to a COVID death. Her nonprofit is called COVID is a Thief. For context, we recorded this episode on June 10th, 2022. Megan has also written a book called COVID is a Thief that she is working on publishing. The link to her nonprofit is in the notes below, as well as a link to the nonprofit's Instagram, where you can find a preview chapter of Megan's book. She talks about the Hulu show called The Orphans of COVID by journalist David Muir, and a link to that show is also in the notes. Finally, about midway through this episode, we do talk in detail about what happens when a person is on a ventilator for a longer period of time. This may be triggering for some. And with that, I'd like to welcome Megan to the show.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you live in South Carolina.
Yes, like right on the right on the South Carolina, Georgia border.
Oh, wow. Wow, I've never been there.
Yeah.
And we are talking about your mom today, who passed away in November 2021.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So where I like to start is March of 2020. And in this case, because most of your story takes place the next year, I just kind of want you to touch on how you first heard about COVID and what happened. Like, how did it change your life, your family's life? And your mom lived in Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely. So we own a subscription box business. And so we kind of started hearing rumblings of this. And at first we were just kind of concerned about logistics and being able to keep our employees and how all of this was going to work. At the time, our kind of like packing workforce was adults with intellectual disabilities. And a lot of those workers can't tell you if they're feeling ill or, if they're not doing well. And then a lot of these disabilities are also kind of coupled with some health conditions. And so we were so concerned about them. And so that was kind of like our first, I guess, introduction to it. And then obviously our children, I have 2 young kids. One will be in 2nd grade and one will be in kindergarten. And we started hearing, rumblings of their school shutting down. And so we were just kind of trying to navigate this as parents. And, I grew up kind of up north and outside of Chicago. And it was such a different response in kind of the suburbs of Chicago, what my parents were experiencing versus South Carolina. It was kind of like, it wasn't really happening in South Carolina. I think very similar experience to Florida. That was kind of the approach people were taking until we had to, we had to face it and schools shut down. And so, my family, we were all just kind of trying to figure it out. And as soon as the vaccinations became available, my dad got it, my brother, my uncles, my, immediate family, and everyone except for my mom. And my mom was just absolutely hell bent on not getting it. And so I just kind of always had this fear. She was the kind of person who couldn't get a upper respiratory infection without it going into full blown bronchitis. She was just notorious for that. I worried about her age and her weight as well. And so there was a lot of kind of begging and pleading on my end for her to get it. And she would say, no, I'm going to be careful. I'm wearing a mask everywhere. And her job, she was the owner of some multifamily apartments. And so she would be in the office and there was a window. So she wasn't really coming in contact with that many people. And so she chose to not be vaccinated. And so we just kind of put the business on autopilot. We had to hold off on our workforce, but we kind of just made it work. The kids were out of school for 2 months. And it was just kind of these constant, delicate conversations with my mom of just be careful. It might sound weird, but I just always kind of had this feeling that if she were to get it, it wouldn't be good. And so I would screenshot stories of people, who were being hospitalized or kind of always keeping her in the loop, kind of hoping it would be this wake up call, look, there's people in the hospital, my age, right? And not even 63, but my age. This is serious. But that was kind of my, I guess, initial experience with it.
Yeah. Did your mom, did she ever talk about why she didn't want to get vaccinated? Was it health concerns? Was it, do you know?
I think it was a combo of a few different things. So I think she was a little bit scared of some side effects, but she had definitely kind of gone down the political rabbit hole. And, I don't say any of this to disparage her at all. When she went to urgent care for, I think, the second time, we have, and I feel like it was kind of like this gift. We had her notes, are transcribed, her medical transcripts, and the woman said, like, nice 63-year-old female, when asked why she didn't get the COVID vaccine, she replied, and it was verbatim, I read a lot of misinformation and I really regret not getting the vaccination. And so to know that she had that regret is kind of why I feel almost that I have permission to kind of speak that she knew it was the wrong choice. And unfortunately, it was too late. And that's what we hear in so many of these stories, is the regret, because you don't think it's going to happen to you or your loved ones. But I'm glad that I was able to see that on paper, and know, not that I ever wanted her to regret it, but to know that if she could have done things differently, she would have, right? She wasn't going to hold out at the 11th hour and still be like, no, vaccination bad. This was a woman who was in deep trouble. She had gone to the urgent care twice and been actually to the hospital, urgent care, and then immediately into ICU. But it was a woman who was living it and had that regret. And that's like my message is, you don't want to be at the 11th hour having regret, it's not a good place to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
When was the last time you saw your mom?
I saw her in the ICU. But before that, she actually came to South Carolina. She had just bought a second home to retire in, and her boyfriend were renovating it. And I said goodbye to her in my driveway. I gave her a hug, just told her I loved her so much, and she drove away. And that was the last time, just right in the driveway. Like, you would never think that would be your last time, you would see your loved one. And it sounds so cliche, but I definitely operate my life differently, because you never think that it's going to be like, that this could happen to you, not even COVID, just life, right? One of us could go out in a car and not come home, whatever it is. And so I said bye to her in the car, or in the driveway, and that was it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So why don't you go into, do you know how she got COVID and what happened with her before she went into the hospital and then finally being admitted?
Yeah, absolutely. So we think, she said to me, Meg, I was on the plane and this man next to me was so sick and he kept pulling down his mask to blow his nose. And so I think she got it from the plane. We'll never really know, but for her to have it be that notable and to mention it to me, and the timeline matches up, I do think she might have gotten it from somebody who was sick on the airplane back to Chicago, from South Carolina. And it hit really quickly and fast. And so her boyfriend was actually here, who was not vaccinated either, and was working on the house still. And then he was going to be coming home in like a week or two back up to Chicago. So she was actually by herself. And which, might have been a blessing, because if her boyfriend had contracted it, he wasn't vaccinated either. You never know. He might have been okay. He might not have. But she wasn't feeling well, ran the fever, had the bad cough. And I just had this overwhelming feeling like she was in trouble. And so I had a Target delivery order for a pulse ox, right on your hand. And I think she had maybe had it right when she got the positive result. There was like a little waiting time, right? Like a lag time of 2 or 3 days. By the time she got the positive result, she was already in trouble. And so you want your oxygen, like for somebody normal, to be at like 98 and above or whatever. And she was already sitting at like 89, and she was only 4 days in. And I have these videos that she sent me via text message, and she's doing her pulse ox. And she wasn't one to like cuss or swear, but at the end of the video, and I didn't discover until after she was gone, there's a long pause, and then she just goes, shit. And I think she knew. And so she went into the emergency room, and they gave her like an inhaler and steroids. And they did prescribe an antiviral. I don't remember which one it was, but actually the pharmacist denied her because she was out of the 5 days when you can take it. And I do wonder if we had gotten that in her and the virus wasn't, able to multiply or progressively get worse, if she was able to take that, would things have been a little different? We'll never know. And then she came home, she went in again, and then they sent her home with oxygen, but by then she was really, really in trouble. And so we had some conversations, and it was just after the first hospital visit, the steroids weren't allowing her to sleep. And so she was getting no sleep. And I said, it's going to be important that you lay on your stomach. Because, you had heard that proning was helping people. So lay on your stomach when you're trying to sleep, just get some sleep. And if you can't sleep, maybe, take a melatonin or something. And she refused. And so she went back in a second time because it got dangerously low again. And then they did the same thing and they sent her home this time with oxygen. And so we knew things were like getting worse, and so my mom's boyfriend at the time got home, drove through the night, got to her, and something shifted in her and the fight was getting hard. And I found out later that she had told her boyfriend the night before she entered the ICU, she said, I don't think I'm going to make it. And I think she knew how serious it was. And she'd sent me a text, like, this is different. And then she was like denying phone calls, which she would have never done. I'm sure it was hard for her to breathe. And the kind of final straw that pushed her into ICU, my mom's boyfriend ran an errand and she was sitting on the sofa. And when he got back, her lips were blue. And her oxygen had gone down to 45, which medically is big trouble.
Yeah.
And they rushed her over to the urgent care. And I don't know how she walked in. I don't know how she was able to speak. I have no clue. At your oxygen being at 45, you're in grave danger. And she did it. And then they took her immediately to the ICU. And that was the last time that she, I guess, saw the outside. She was wheeled out, waved goodbye, and was immediately taken into ICU. So it happened so quick. That's, I think, the hardest thing to wrap your brain around is just how quick it happens.
Yeah. And your intuition bells were going off from the beginning.
Yeah. And I think it's like this connected feeling between mother and daughter. And I think she had it too. And I think I told my husband when she entered the ICU, I said, like, I'm not being negative. And I know that there's always hope, but I don't think she's going to make it through this. And I just knew. I can't explain it. I just knew. And I'm very thankful for that intuition because it led me to, like, when I did get to talk to her before she went on the ventilator, it allowed me to have a beautiful last conversation with her. And it allowed me to operate knowing that I'd probably lose her. So, I wasn't naive to the fact, which I think was a gift for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what did you say in your last conversation with her?
Yeah. So we got to have a few, but the very last one, I'm literally in the aisles of TJ Maxx. She had asked for bendable straws. She had texted my brother and she'd been in the ICU a few days. She wasn't on a ventilator yet. It was coming, but she asked for bendable straws. So I went out to TJ Maxx and I got her some bendable straws and some like fuzzy socks and a blanket. And I had printed out pictures of the kids and I sent the package, which she never ended up receiving. And I had sent it to my brother's house and I asked my sister-in-law, because I knew it would be hard for my brother. I'm like, just go get this package and just hide it, please. I didn't want my brother to have to know that she wasn't going to get that package. And so she calls and she starts off the conversation. She says, oh, I'm gonna cry. She says, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. And like my mom had never really said, I'm sorry for anything. And so I was like, Mom, no, it's okay. And she goes like, I'm stupid. I'm so stupid. And I make stupid decisions. And I was like, Mom, it's all right. It's going to be okay. It's okay. And she was just kind of talking. She had said, you know, if I get out of here, I'm going to marry Dominic, who was her boyfriend. And I said, like, okay, whatever you want, I'll support you, like whatever you want. And I told her that I really needed her to fight. My brother's 27 at the time, and he hasn't had kids yet. He was so freshly married, just months. And I said, Mom, like, I need you to fight for Michael's children. And she said, like, oh, trust me, I've run over every scenario. And then she said that they kept on wanting her to go onto the vent, right? Because they don't want to get into what they call as an emergent situation, where like even that time between taking off a full face oxygen mask and intubating could be really, really, really like you're in trouble. And so she said, I guess I'll try if I need to, but I knew she didn't want to. She had been denying it and denying it. They had been wanting her to get on it for days. And I said, I think that's a good idea. I think your lungs just need some time to try and heal. And we knew she wasn't sleeping at all. And the body can't fight if you're not sleeping, and, you know, just basic function. And she was fighting so hard. And so then I had told her that her brother had come down to support, you know, the family, and she got really emotional about that. And she started getting out of breath. And so I knew I had to get off the phone with her. She like could not breathe, and I could hear it. And I could tell she was scared too. And I said, you know, I just said, like, I love you. You're the best mom. Like, the kids will always know you. Just kind of just told her I loved her, and that was it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm so thankful, because in like connecting with other people, so many other people just didn't get that. And so I feel very lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that you have to quantify luck that way.
Yeah.
You know, like, you're lucky to have this conversation with her, and other people didn't get that. And yet still your mom went on a ventilator. And so why don't you tell us about that?
Oh gosh, yeah, that was kind of like the worst. And that's when I really, really knew that there was no turning back. So it was a night nurse, and he had called and said, I think normal breaths per minute, I'm not sure what it is, but she had gotten to the point where it was like she was running a marathon. And my brother, which I hate that he had to see it, but he said that he went. They let us come in a lot, whether it was from the window or actually getting into her room. I think because it was so late in the pandemic that they made a lot of exceptions, which we're so appreciative of. And my brother said to me, Make, she's totally asleep, but it's like she's running a marathon. And her chest just going up and down, right? Because her lungs don't even have capacity to take a full breath. So, you know, they had said, you know, she can last like this for like 3 or 4 days, but like, you know, a normal, like healthy 35-year-old could do it for maybe 6, but she's exhausted and it's time. And so she finally agreed. And so they put her on a ventilator. And I wish one more time I had gotten to talk to her, or I wish we would have really pushed. So if anybody is listening and their, you know, loved one ever falls ill, make sure that, I didn't think we really understood that the ventilator meant like no communication, that she would be on heavy, heavy, heavy sedation. And I would have pushed for one more conversation. Like, we had tried, but she had been sleeping or whatever. And I wish we would have pushed a little bit harder, just knowing that would be truly the last time. And so my brother and her boyfriend were able to go to the ICU right before she was ventilated. And my brother like gave her a thumbs up and like a heart, and she waved and did a heart back and then rolled over. And then she got on the ventilator, and she never came off. I think they say like later in the pandemic, you have a 50-50 shot. You know, it will work for some people, it won't for others. And it didn't help her whatsoever. It just didn't.
And so you told me when we spoke before that Your mom was on a ventilator for 30 days.
Yeah, just about, like close to 3 weeks. And so something that's really important to understand is that you can't stay on a ventilator for too long, because it's risk of infection and things like that. So there is very much a time clock that gets started. And if improvements don't happen within that period, they either, want to end care or go to a tracheotomy, which has some serious life, not consequences, but decisions. I guess you could say consequences, which means that if your lungs are not going to fix themselves, right? It's not an organ that can really heal itself.
Yeah.
Then you basically would be on that tracheotomy for life, which means a tube feeding, and means some might be able to get up and walk around, but others won't. And so we got on that ventilator and the time clock very much started. Yeah.
Yeah. And I want you to tell this part of your family's story if you want to, because I know you had talked about your younger brother and he lived in Chicago, right?
Yeah, right near her. Yeah.
So your family made, or at least wanted to make, some decisions about how long she was on the ventilator and your mom's boyfriend. And I don't know if you want to talk about that, but if you do, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was really interesting to me. And there is no wrong or right answer. It's just how you process grief. And ultimately, it's in the hands of who you appoint to your medical power of attorney. And so I was very much in the school of thought that from the beginning, I had just accepted that she wasn't going to make it. And I did not want to see, I was able to receive the messages from the doctors differently than the rest of my family. And again, it's not that they were making mistakes or doing anything wrong. It was just literally, they believed that she had the possibility in the deepest part of their souls that she could make it. And the doctors had said, like, she has a less than 1% chance of making it, and I won't give it 0 because I'm not God. And then we'd have a different doctor that would tell us the same thing, and another one and another one. And then there was the interpretation of medical results too, right? Like they'd give us a little nugget of hope. We were able to turn the pressure on her ventilator down, or, none of her other organs are failing. And so sometimes you can cling on to that information, but not see the entire picture. And so it was really hard, because I believe that she wouldn't have wanted to stay on that long. Again, we'll never know. And we never had any of those hard conversations either. Like for my dad, I know he would never, ever, ever want to be in a situation where he's like on life support or prolonged means, right? But my mom, we had never really talked about any of this. So that was another thing. I was operating off of one roadmap that was just gut instinct, and my brother and my mom's boyfriend were operating off of another, in the school of thought of, I'm not giving up. You're giving up. I'm not going to give up. And to me, it was harder to watch her suffer than to lose her. And there's also the school of thought too, that she's not suffering because she's on all these sedatives. She has no idea what's going on. And to me, it was suffering. And so it's just really important. I think it's not about like blame or the journey, right? It's have these conversations, like make sure your medical power of attorney and your funeral arrangements have been spoken about, and your will is in order, your trust. These are conversations and things that we all should have in order. God forbid we're ever put in this situation, because it all could have been so different, right? Yeah.
So did your family make a decision just at some point to have your mom come off the vent, or was it something where her body gave out and it just happened?
No. So we had this one doctor, and we had given them the nickname, it wasn't to be mean, of Dr. Death, right? Because he would just kind of hit you over the head with it. And he said, she's not going to make it. She will not have a quality of life. She is suffering, This was against her wishes. She did not want this. And that conversation is what made me get on the plane and come to Chicago. She's doing worse. I literally heard this phone call, this medical update, and got straight on a plane, like didn't even say bye to my kids because they were in school, just went. So I got there and it was, I don't know, it feels like something out of a movie. Like, it's like I can replay it in my mind in slow motion. Like, she was in the hospital that I was born in, and life had like truly come full circle. And my dad picked me up from the airport. My brother comes to get me so he can take me to my mom. They're going to let us go in and see her. And I can just like remember walking down the hallway with my brother. He knows the route, right? We go up the elevator 3 floors, walk down, and his steps slow, and I know I'm going to see her. And I mean, this gets a little bit graphic, but I think it's important because I just don't think people get it. So I walk into a room, you have to suit up, right? And you have to do things in a certain order too. Like, you got to put on gloves and then a gown, and then somebody has to help you get these goggles on, and then you have to have a fresh mask. It's like a ritual routine. And so I go in and they have her proned, and like one of her legs is sticking out of the blanket and her shoulders exposed. And I turn the corner and I just remember saying like, oh, Mom, like, oh my God. So she's literally, face down, her head's turned. She's got this tubes coming out of her mouth, and like she's just in like a pool of her own, I don't know, like saliva, nose secretions, and it's collecting at like literally at her eye, and her hair is like matted, and they've used like an office rubber band, right? It's all they have. They just need to get it out of the way. And she's got dried blood on her arms, and I'm just like overwhelming, like, holy shit, she cannot go on like this. Like, this is terrible. And so I mean, I'll never forget that image. And I wish that image could be shared with people that are like on the fence to be vaccinated or, hesitant. Like, that's the reality of it. Your loved ones are going to see you like that. And so we went in, and my brother and I just kind of like sat there with her, and I don't even know how it happened, but we just started singing her "You Are My Sunshine," which she sang to us as kids. And we just like had our last words with her, and we walked out, like, we just said, "I love you," and we walked out. And the doctor came to talk to us again and was like, she's not going to make it. Like, she didn't want this, the same thing over again. And so we had all kind of like made this decision that we were going to pull her off the vent. And I just had this like resounding echo in my mind or my head that she'd wanted to get married. And so I said, listen, before we do it, can we have like a commitment ceremony for her and her boyfriend? Like, she wanted to get married. That's like literally her last wish that she had expressed to me on the phone. And so they agreed, and oh my God, they went above and beyond. And so I said to the nurse, I said, I know you're so busy. I'm so sorry, but can we get her unproned, and can you please clean her up? Because I knew all the family was going to come in from Chicago, and I didn't want anyone else to have to see her that way. And so, they bathed, like kind of sponge bathed her, whatever, fixed her hair, really cleaned her up, flipped her over. And we had a commitment ceremony, and her boyfriend went home and changed clothes. My brother went to the store and literally bought every single flower that they had, just bouquets and bouquets of flowers. And we had like a little commitment ceremony. Obviously, like, she was fully unconscious, but we did it. And I mean, it was really nice. I mean, it's heartbreaking for sure, but it was like the last thing that I felt like I could do for her. And so it was very much my understanding that we were going to end care after this, right? And everyone was coming in to say their last goodbye. And we were waiting on my uncle, who needed to drive a few hours to get to her. And after that ceremony, in between that time and the time that my uncle arrived, it was very much like ping pong, like, yes, we're going to do this, but no, she might still have a chance. No, yes, kind of all these things. And so it ended up not happening. And the doctor called us into like the family waiting room, and they couldn't do it. I had no power. Obviously, I wasn't her medical power of attorney. And so I just said, like, I love all of you. I respect you, but I have to leave. And I literally walked out of the waiting room to like probably 10, 15 family members, asked my cousin for a ride home, and I got out of there. And I very much knew that night that I was going to have not a battle on my hands, but I knew that I needed to let them go down the path that they thought was best. And you literally, I have no power, no, my say doesn't really have a seat at the table. And so I knew I needed to go home for my mental health. I didn't know how long this was going to go on, but I knew I couldn't be there for it. And so I had asked for a family meeting. I tried one more time the following day. It was the same message. We're not going to give up on her. I said, like, okay, then I have to go. And I booked a ticket the next day, and I came back to South Carolina, and she was on the ventilator, I think, for another 2 weeks. We were steps away from doing a tracheotomy, even though, it was kind of like, we'll do it, but knowing that her lungs weren't going to get better, but that was just kind of the next natural step. And she had developed an allergic reaction somehow the morning of the tracheotomy that was supposed to happen, and her tongue and lips had swelled up real bad, like very bad, and they couldn't do it, which was a gift. And then 2 days later, I think after that, we were kind of consulting with like a family physician, and he had spoken to one of the doctors. I think it actually might have been the Dr. Death, and said, I promised you I would tell you when it was time to call this, if it's time to call. And it is. She did not want this. It's going against the wishes that she expressed to the doctor. She will not make a meaningful recovery. A long-term care facility would not even accept her because we were never able to successfully wean her off of sedation. And she's in this no man's land, and it's time. And so I got a call that night, and my brother had no idea that it was our wedding anniversary. He had no clue, and I wasn't going to tell him because I needed her suffering to end. And he asked me if I wanted to come up there, and I said, like, no, don't wait another minute, do it. And so I literally, with my husband, watched my mom pass away on FaceTime. They removed the vent, they like turned down the lights, they had nice calming music. And my brother FaceTimes me, and her eyes are wide open, right? She hasn't been awake in like a month. And she fought for like a solid hour, almost to the minute. And it was the most surreal thing. They had prepared us that she might like take some gas, or it might be a little traumatic, but that they could give her some like drugs for that. There was none of that. It literally was just, her eyes never blinked, right? Because she's coming off of like crazy drugs.
Yeah.
And I hope she was in like a dreamlike state. And we just watched the heart monitor go from 90 down to 0. And that was it. There was no dramatic breaths. There was nothing traumatic. It just literally, she had about an hour, and that was it. And it was terrible, but it was worse for me to watch her the way that she had been. So there was some peace knowing that she didn't have to fight so hard anymore, which is so strange. And I was so thankful too that like I got to be there, and we would talk to her, but her heart rate would go up because she could hear us. And then it would go back down, and then it would go up again. And so we were like, this is prolonging it, like no more talking. So we stopped talking. And I think it was about 20 minutes after that. So wild, right? Because none of her body, nothing else failed her. It was just her organs. But the sweet doctor said, all you need is one single organ failure, right? Everything else can hold out strong. But if one organ fails, in the lungs, she would have never qualified for a lung transplant. She was too, old. and overweight. And so that was all she needed. You know, you can't sustain life without your lungs. You just can't. Yeah.
Where my mind goes, I think about like your husband, and my husband was with me when we talked to my mom. I know that it was hard for him. I know it's hard for me, but to have those people that we love, like right next to us, helping us through those hard things. I couldn't imagine having done those last FaceTime calls with my mom by myself.
No, 100%. And so it was just, he's incredible, right? And he was there for the whole thing and just like jumped in. So he got to talk to her on the phone once. I think it was the night before she went into the ICU. I knew something was wrong. I knew like her oxygen was lower than she was letting on. She wasn't making any sense. And she said, "Happy anniversary." And I'm like, "Oh no, like you're a month early." I know, right?
Yeah.
And she said, "No, I have to tell you, you guys were the most beautiful couple. Happy anniversary." And I'm like, okay. Like, I mean, and then she dies on my wedding anniversary 30 days later. It's just wild.
Yeah, that is wild.
My husband had the most comforting words to her. And then when she was prone to like that, I had called him, you know, as my brother and I are saying goodbye or whatever. And I said, you know, "Brian, it's really bad. Like, if you don't want to see her like this, I understand. Like, it's real bad." And he was like, "No." And it was so like, I'll never forget. I turned the FaceTime around and he said the same words to me. He was like, "Oh, Mom." And he told her, he's like, "It's okay if you need to go be with God. Like, I'm going to take care of your daughter and your grandkids eternally. Like, you will never have to worry. Like, and you don't have to fight anymore because I will take care of them." And like, that speaks more than like wedding vows or the day-to-day, like, you know, stuff that you go through. Like, on her deathbed, that was his main concern. Like, I wouldn't even had that thought pop in my head that she was worried about that. Yeah. And he just told her that he loved her so much and thank you for everything she's ever done. And I mean, for him to be sitting there, you know, through every doctor's update and all these just roller coasters and take care of the kids and jump into action, and then that he was there to watch her final breaths, is just like, we're bonded in a way that like I didn't even know existed, you know?
Yeah.
Very, very lucky.
Yeah. So it has you are in the middle of your first year and all those experiences, and then your mom passed away in November, so you had Christmas 2021. How are you working through that, and are you like the bigger days, birthdays, Christmas, any other things, how are you working through that?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that we had was my brother's birthday. It was December 8th. She'd just barely been gone. And birthdays were like a big deal. So she would call us the night before, the morning of. She would be the first one to call you, and that night to be like, "How was your birthday?" And so I just knew I needed to do it. So I knew it was like, you know, so early in Chicago. I was probably up with the kids at like 7, which is 6 his time. And I just called and I said, like, I don't know, I don't remember if he answered or not, but I said, "I'm calling. I'm going to do what Mom would have done. Like, happy birthday. I hope you have the best day." And I think that was kind of like the, "Oh God, I'm going to try and fill some of these shoes" moment realization. And there's been a few more moments like that with my daughter too, where it's like, okay, I'm coming into her shoes to fill like a void. Like, they wanted to do a fairy garden together. And when I said goodbye to her in the driveway, she was showing us all this fairy garden stuff. So my daughter's birthday was in March, and I took 2 of my best girlfriends into her house. I was like, we have to find this fairy garden stuff. And I hated going into that house because it's like this life that we'll never get to have with her. And like, they were just so supportive, and we got the fairy garden stuff, and everyone sent her gifts for the fairy garden and books and little trinkets, and my girlfriends found stuff, and it was just so meaningful. And I've been able Christmas was weird, but it was very important to me to give the kids some normalcy. So I put one foot in front of the other. I think I held it together pretty well. The birthdays I've done okay. I was never like a person that cried very much, and like literally I've never cried so much in my life since I've lost her. But Mother's Day was just pure torture. And like I tried to be okay, but I could not navigate how to celebrate myself as a mother without having my mother here for the first time. It was just like too much. And I mean, I cried a lot. Like my husband like knew that it would be hard and was like wonderful, but that was by far just the really most hard thing.
Yeah, my first Mother's Day was it was brutal. I didn't want to get out of bed, and yet I have these kids and grandkids that were sending me Mother's Day cards and text messages and video messages, and it was just so hard without my mom.
100%. I think too, one thing I'll do next year is I'm not going to get on social media around that time. It was really hard to see all these people with their moms and pictures and like warm wishes. And it was just, I think that made it even more difficult. And I think just checking out for a few days might do me well. And I'm going to really try and think of something like meaningful to do in her honor of that day, and make sure that I give myself space too. That's not about losing her, you know? But yeah, that was by far just bizarre, you know, so strange.
This Mother's Day I've been through too. This last one was a touch better. I will say. I ended up I had scheduled to go visit my dad in Oklahoma, and I planned this week there. And it wasn't until probably a week before I left that someone said, "You're not going to be there at home for Mother's Day." And I realized, I'm going to see my dad over Mother's Day weekend. And my stepmom was really great about it. It was nice to be there and spend time with them and do things with my stepbrothers and sisters and their family. So it was nice to make a different kind of a memory, and also be with my dad, who loved my mom a lot. You know, he was devastated by her death, but he and my stepmom have been married for almost 40 years. But he and my mom were still friendly. So yeah, it's that first year. They say that the first year is the hardest. I totally disagree with that now that I'm in the second year. It is what it is. It takes what it takes to work through it. And one of the things that you told me is you wrote a book. How did that come about?
So it was really, like I said, I mean, 30 days doesn't sound like it happened so fast, but it did. And I wasn't able to kind of like process it. I was just trying to put one foot in front of the other, maintain normalcy for my kids, and just know that I had to do the best I could for them. And so there was no like processing it. So we get out of this, and so many like remarkable moments happen that were just like so serendipitous, like godlike, whatever you believe. It was just incredible. And so I think too, once I found out that she had regret of not being vaccinated, it was important for me to start telling her story. And so the book is called COVID's a Thief. I'm in the final kind of workings of it, but every chapter is one day of the last 30 days of her life. And it was, it's important for me to tell the story, but it also was super healing to go back and kind of like revisit all the conversations and text messages and what happened and how did it happen. And, you know, you can't even remember, well, how many days was she on the vent, or when did she get this? And so it was very helpful for me to go through the day to day to process everything that happened and tell the story too. Was incredibly like healing. And I think that my mom was a very smart woman, and I don't know how she kind of fell into this political mistrust. But I say in my book, you know, there was 3, you know, causes of death. It was pneumonia, COVID-19, and lung failure. And I think the 4th should have been political mistrust. I really do. And I don't know. I'll never be able to wrap my head around just how the political kind of nonsense was able to resonate so deep in her that it cost her her life. But I think that it's an important thing to be, telling, because I know that there's so many other people in my shoes as well. And it's about grief and trying to navigate it as a mom and a daughter as much as it is about telling her story, but it's been incredibly healing for me.
When did you start writing it after your mom passed away? How long?
I think about a month later. And it was like really crazy to go back and like visit all the doctor's conversations and text messages and listen to her voicemail and put all the puzzle pieces together. And there was all these revelations, right? Like I was so shocked that in the moment, I never did very much research on like her medical condition at the time. I was so blessed that one of my good friends is an ICU nurse. And rather than bogging down like their staff, it was important for me to just ask her questions and I could level with her, right? And so I would say like, tell me the truth. Like her carbon dioxide is going through the roof. Like, does this indicate that we're like at the end? Like you don't be afraid to not be delicate with me. And I would get very straight shooter. Yes, like that's not good. The lungs are overcompensating. And I was just able to have like such a resource at my, disposal. And so that was incredible. Being able to kind of inner work that into the chapters of the book and really understand why I had a different perspective than my family. They didn't have that. And so it's been healing too, to understand we had two different paths, but it's okay. It's all right. That's kind of, I think, the greatest gift from it as well.
Yeah. Did it help with the grief fog a little bit to like look at all of that and remember and write it out?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm kind of that person too that likes to write down everything on a to-do list so I don't forget.
Yeah.
And I feel like putting all of this pen to paper, I can let it go because I don't have to keep it as like a story in my heart. I put it on paper. I can start to let some of it go, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
So you'll have to keep me posted on the book and publishing and all of that other stuff. I would love to be up to date on that.
Yeah, it will be my pleasure.
Yeah. And so your book is COVID is a Thief, but you also told me that you started a nonprofit.
Yeah, I did. So, like I mentioned, I hadn't been doing any research while she was sick, but there was times in the book where I wanted to do research and I've gone back and had a lot of revelations. Like near the end, her working lung capacity was equivalent to a newborn baby. And there would be like these little nuggets of like, wow, she was that sick, or new perspective that I could gain. And so I said, I'd started joining maybe like one Facebook group for other people who had lost, loved ones to COVID. And that this thought popped in my mind. I'm like, I'm 35 at the time, and this has been the hardest thing I've ever gone through. Like, how do children go through this? I'm like, what's happening to these people? And so COVID truly like is the thief of so many different things. And for over 200,000 children in the US alone who have lost a primary caregiver to COVID under the age of 18, it was very important that I do something in my mom's honor to help these children. And the statistics that you come across once you do a little bit of research is just crazy. So like 1 in 12 orphans now are due to a COVID death. 2 children per public school in the United States have lost a primary caregiver. And it's just, so I see these statistics, right, as I'm writing the book, and then I'm thinking, what are we doing for them? There's the FEMA funeral service that is very helpful, but there is no system to identify who these children are, no system of aftercare to help them, right? The mental toll. And then what I don't think most people realize too is in lower income, you have lots of multi-generational homes. So maybe grandma got COVID, then mom got it, then grandpa got it, or an aunt or uncle, and they are left with nobody. Mm-hmm. And so I started the COVID is a Thief charity. It's officially a 501c3. And I started trying to identify a family that we could help. And it was extremely difficult, right? Because again, there's no way to identify these kids. We don't even know who they are if we wanted to help them. So I started reaching out to like guidance counselors, and it took a while. And I was just like, okay, this is going to be a little bit harder than I thought. And so I had been following this family on Facebook. He was my age. His name is Walker Smith. And he, I thought, was going to make it. He had COVID, came off the ventilator. His lungs were just destroyed, was one final approval away from getting a lung transplant. He was on ECMO, and he passed away. And I woke up, I saw this, and I was like, oh my God, this is my family. And she has a son with him, and they have a baby on the way. And when I had first imagined doing this, I thought, I'd be helping maybe a younger child. I never thought it would be for an unborn child. That's just insane to think. They had gotten pregnant before he went into the ICU. He fought for months. And so all the funds that I'm raising right now, just to put a face to the name, is for the Walker Smith family. And I am trying to, she needed a dresser for the baby's nursery. And then she's having a baby shower. And then whatever she doesn't get, I'm going to take funds and kind of get everything on her baby registry. And just, trying to provide care that way. And then also if the family down the road, for the little boy ever needs any mental health care or anything like that, that's what the funds will go to. And I can't wait to identify more families that need help and more children, and just be able to, in my mom's honor, raise some funds to help these kids.
Yeah. And I think about it too, like you mentioned, also there's kids like your daughter who lost a grandma, and grandmas are so important.
100%. 100%. So one of the most wild, I think, things that happened is watching her process the grief. And she had passed away late at night. And so I told my husband, I said, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to tell her, that she's gone. And if all hell breaks loose, she'll obviously stay home from school. And if she just kind of moves on and goes through the motions, we'll take her to school. So every single morning I go in and I wake my daughter up, and she's completely calm. She doesn't say anything. I rub her back. I'll go open her curtains. It's never it's just so calm. And I've done this for years. Right. And so I go into her room and I said, Faye, and she gets up on her bed and she's on her knees, but her eyes are closed. And she's grabbing at my neck to hug me. And I'm like, Faye. And she says, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And it was identical to the 3 I'm sorry's that my mom said in her last conversation. It was so distinct, so bizarre. And it scared me so much that I kind of pushed Faye away. And she opened her eyes and she's like, what? And I was like, honey, grandma's gone. And she was just inconsolable. And so I had to take a minute, she said I didn't get to say goodbye. She asked me who was going to take care of her boyfriend. I held her. I was like, no, we can say goodbye. She's always going to be with us. She cried. And then I had to take a minute because it was just, I mean, you never can prepare yourself for that, for a child that's old enough to understand death, but not really.
Yeah.
So I knew I had to tell my son. So I told my husband, I'm going to go just for a second. I'm going to collect myself. I'll be back. So then my son was still sleeping at the time, and my husband kept them completely separate. And my daughter was on her iPad in her room, and my son was in the playroom. So I walk in and I'm like, okay, I have to do this again. Now, hopefully this will be easier because this is with, the pre-kindergartner at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I walk in and I said, honey, remember how I told you grandma was sick? And he just looked at me. He's like, yeah, she went to go be with God. And I was like, what? And he was like, grandma is in heaven with God. And I was like, I literally walk out of the playroom. I'm like, Brian, did you did you tell Hudson? He was like, no, what are you talking about? Like, I haven't told him a word yet. I was like, Brian, he knows. And I mean, it was just wild. There's no, I didn't have to like tell them in a way, you know, like I do believe they knew. I don't know if my mom came to them or whatever you want to believe, but I mean, that was next level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. You've got to wonder if your
I
mom
know.
was there and just said goodbye on her own to them. Because kids, I believe anybody can, but I think kids especially have a unique view of the world and see things that we don't see as we
100%.
Yeah.
I totally agree. Totally.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That got me.
I know,
That
it's
got
wild.
me. Yeah.
I know. There's been like little moments like that too, where Faye just out of nowhere has said like grandma's, you know, we always say like a cardinal is for my grandma. And she said, well, grandma's going to be a ladybug. And I was just like, okay. And that next morning I went to go open her curtains and a ladybug flies past my arm and lands on this crystal kind of sun catcher that my mom had bought her. And I thought it was like a ornament. She had given it to her at Christmas time. And my mom's like, why don't you have it up in her room? I'm like, I didn't know. I had it in the Christmas bin. So that next Christmas, I made sure to put it on her wall or on her window. And the ladybug flies past my left arm and lands on the glass crystal that I had put out, that my mom had asked me to put out. I'm like, what are the chances, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's just all those little signs, and just really trying to remember that like she's still here with us. That's the most important thing. I think the one thing that has not faded for me is that like on the regular, I'm just like, I can't believe my mom's gone. Like it's like like I cannot believe it. It's just so surreal. But as time like starts to heal some wounds, I just constantly really believe she is with us. Like she's here.
Yeah. Yeah. I felt like for a while after my mom passed away, because she was in a memory care with Alzheimer's when she got COVID, that I could drive up to that building and go to the window and that they would just wheel her out or bring her out, or she would walk out however she was feeling that day. And it just seemed so surreal to me that I felt like she was tucked away in that building somewhere. And if I went there, I would see her. It just, and I think some of that comes from watching it on video. It's not like we aren't there.
Yeah, 100%. I so know what you mean. And it's just like you want to pick up the phone call. Like I've legit had times where I've thought about picking up the phone to call her to tell her something, and I have to remember she's not going to be there. And it's just such a habit. I spoke to her every day, and then it's just gone. And you just sometimes like forget, which catches me off guard. You know, you're just kind of like, oh, no, no. I do, you know, some of the tougher medical images at first, I think was like mimicking some PTSD, but like time and putting them down on the book and trying to make a conscious effort to replace those memories, because I know she wouldn't want me to hold them in like my heart, has helped a lot. But it's grief is just a funny thing. It's interesting for sure.
Yeah, it is. Was your family able to have a funeral or a memorial service for your mom?
Yeah, we did. So we had a like a memorial service, and there was like a viewing or whatever. People got to come say goodbye, and then she was cremated. And then I want to do something eventually with her ashes. Like right now, she's on my bookshelf, which is just wild, with my grandmother, her mom. And there's something symbolic for me about like setting her free, because I feel like COVID was so hard for her, and a lot of things in her life were very difficult. And I don't know when the time's going to be, but I'll know. I want to like take those ashes and like just set her free. And I don't know. I don't feel like she belongs on my bookshelf. I had a little bit of her ashes put into a necklace. I'll keep that forever. But like, symbolically, I want to spread the ashes somewhere that really means something. And I just don't know what it is yet.
Yeah.
We were lucky though, again, that perspective, like if it had been earlier in the pandemic, you know, people didn't really know how to navigate funerals or having to make sure they pare down the guest list or whatever. Not everyone can come say goodbye. And that would have been really hard. And I mean, we wore masks at the funeral, but we were very lucky. I mean, I think literally maybe a week after she passed, they announced the like FDA approval of the first true antiviral. The cases were going down. Life was seemingly kind of going not back to normal, but our new normal is what I like to say. And I just think my journey was so different because we were at the tail end of the Delta variant versus what some other people had as an experience earlier on.
Yeah. Yeah, that funeral, we had a memorial service about a year after my mom passed away. And I've talked to many people on the show, and I've also been a part of the Facebook groups and different people who talk about it. And you just don't know how much those grieving rituals mean and matter and help you sort of process being able to see family, hug family, talk to people, tell stories, share memories. And when you can't do that and you're isolated and you're just by yourself with your grief and can't do those community grieving things,
Yes.
It's so hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were so many moments at her funeral, like that meant so much to me. Like it was just, I think for sure, like seeing her for the last time, I like said to my husband, I said, like, I feel like I was so dramatic. And he was like, Megan, you weren't. Like your mother was in a casket, like she's gone. And I remember walking up to her body and just being like, this isn't real. Like, how is this real? And I think I said that out loud a few times and was just sobbing, but I was able to pull myself together and I sent her off with words that were very important to me. And, you know, like I remember my uncle gave me a hug and I said, like, he said, how are you doing? And I said, like, I'm fine. This is all okay. It's okay. And he was like, no, it's not okay. And then like my aunt came up at the end who has kind of transitioned into this like sister mother role and just like grabbed me and was like, I have you, you understand? Like, I have you. And like my parents were divorced, and I think it was very meaningful for my dad to be able to say goodbye to her.
Mm-hmm.
And just so many people showed up that you realize just how far reaching your life impacts people, you know, that was very profound for us as well. And I'm thankful for that moment, as tough as it was. I just remember it was my brother, my husband, and I were driving in the car, and we were like, I don't want to go do this. And like, we're all taking deep breaths. We're all feeling like sick to our stomach. It was, I don't want to do this. And I can't believe we're doing this. I will never forget that drive to the funeral home. Hopefully I don't have to experience another drive to a funeral home for a long time.
Yeah.
But I will never forget that. Never. That feeling in like the deepest pit of your stomach, knowing it's the last time you'll see like your parents' physical body. It's just indescribable.
Yeah.
No.
What do you miss most about your mom?
Oh my gosh. So I never knew to place value on the fact that she was like unconditionally there and could be the supporter of my biggest dreams, right? So I'm an entrepreneur, and I never felt in my life that anything was too far-fetched, because I knew she would always be my soft place to land. And so I said that in her funeral words. I said, you know, she was like my safe harbor. And now I know that it is my job to replicate that for my children so that they feel like whatever they could dream of is just like achievable. And if it doesn't work out, that's okay. And if it does, then she knew it would have all along. And so it's just the conversations, like just knowing that I can't just like call her to give her an update on the kids when I finally get like a quiet moment. That would always be like, I'd find a way to call her if I'm like in the car line or whatever. And what I miss most is this life that we were about to get to have together. So it was going to be that she was going to retire in South Carolina, and like the kids, she was designing rooms for the kids. And it's like this whole symbolic like second act that we didn't get to have. That's been really hard.
Yeah,
for sure. I miss everything.
Yeah, it's hard to narrow it down to one thing, but yeah, there are things that you just feel like so deeply. And yeah.
And like it was complicated mother-daughter relationship too. I feel like when somebody passes away, you don't maybe talk or shed light on that. It wasn't always easy times, but we were getting to like a really good place, and I could see like what it was going to be. And it's just hard, like, and I go back to, COVID's a thief. It's a thief of time. It's the thief of so much that we just won't get to see or do. But, that was the plan. I don't know why, but it was just what was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the last question that I ask everybody is, what do you say to people who tell you COVID isn't real?
Okay, so I haven't had anybody tell me that, but I had a recent experience. I was at a friend's birthday party, and I was sitting outside with an elderly couple and the birthday person's mom, and she was a nurse, and they're all talking about it. I'd say these people were like in their late 80s, and they're talking about COVID, and the older lady who was a nurse or was a nurse was saying, you get a vaccine, and I'm just staying quiet. They have no idea who I am, that I've lost my mom. And she said, we get a vaccine for polio, right? And we get a vaccine for X, Y, and Z. And she's like, but you don't want to get the COVID shot or, the vaccine or, and the guy said something like, I have ivermectin, and it's not going to happen to me. It was to the effect of it's not real, but that they were invincible. And I just like so calmly, I just said, I respect whatever decision you're going to make, but I lost my mom in November. And I really believe if you could walk the journey that I've had to walk, you would change your mind. I was like, because I knew that they had a daughter and a son, like, I am your daughter sitting here without a mother. And I just said, like, I'm sure we'll agree to disagree, because there was no way that they're going to get the vaccine. But until you live it and you go and you see your significant other, or you go on this journey, you never think it's going to happen to you. And then unfortunately, the roll of the dice, it does happen to you. And it is real. It is real. And I just always go back to the fact too, I told them, I said, my mom's last words on her intake form was that she really regretted not getting the vaccine. And I just think that was kind of like left as a gift for me to make sure that I tell that, service of information.
Yeah. So Megan, does your nonprofit have a website?
Yes, absolutely. So it's covidisathief.com. There's a few different ways that you can donate. We're selling like apparel, Pure Vita bracelets, tumblers, or you can just make a straight monetary donation. All of the proceeds will go at first to help the Walker Smith family. Then I hope to identify even more youth beyond that. But if any of you feel so compelled, I greatly appreciate it. I want to draw more awareness to caregiver loss for under the age of 18. And just want to thank you in advance if you find it in your heart to give.
Yeah, I remember last Christmas, COVID Survivors for Change had mentioned that there was 147,000, give or take, children, and just the going up. Well, and I think back then, there was 800,000 people in the United States who had passed away, and the numbers just keep going up and up. And I feel like many of these kids who had two parents and lost one lose so much more because that other parent has to work harder, and they maybe can't afford as many things as the kids used to do. There's just so so much involved and so much loss with losing a parent or a grandparent, because I think a lot of grandparents raise kids too.
Oh, 100% for sure. And David Muir just did a special on it. I believe it's on Netflix. I cannot remember the name at this moment, but it's something like The Lost Faces of COVID or something like that. And he follows around 3 families. One was like brothers and 2 sisters, and they lost their mom and their dad. And watching the older sister navigate how to raise these kids, and somebody in their community stepped in to help them like afford rent, file their mom's last and final taxes, something children would not know to do, check on them, give emotional support. There was a boy who was like in his junior or senior year of high school who lost his dad, and he was just trying to navigate like going to football practice without having his dad there. But David Muir did such a good job of, and it literally came out like 2 weeks after I launched the charity, which was so ironic, of that there are forgotten children and we are not doing enough. There's a senator in California, I have no idea, Democrat, Republican, to be honest, it doesn't matter to me. They're trying to start a fund where these kids can start getting some money. And I mean, that's the most that I've seen, which is just crazy, right? Like, it's not enough.
No, not at all. Not at all. So can families reach out to you through your website too?
Yes, there is absolutely a section on the website to nominate a family. We've had some people come in and do it, and a lot of them are talking about getting money for mental health care for these children. And I just think it's so, so important. But you can absolutely come on and nominate anybody who you know is in need, or if you have lost your significant other or a primary income to, COVID loss, please come, let me know, let me help you for sure.
Okay. And are you on social media, other social media as well?
Yes, on Instagram, and that one's like wide open. And then I did a Facebook group that's more closely mimicking like if you have lost somebody. So, like somebody who's just like random probably wouldn't come to Facebook, go to Instagram. But if you've lost somebody, I'm kind of creating a community within Facebook where you have to answer some questions and things like that. And then we just kind of talk about what this new normal is like.
Yeah. Yeah, the new normal. Oh, I'm using air quotes right now. You can't see me, but I am. Yeah, the back to normal. I hated the back to normal thing, but we do have to walk forward. I mean, we really don't have any choice except to move in that direction of, deep into this pandemic, and whatever happens and however it works itself out, it's going to be around for a long time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your mom's story and your family's story and your book and your nonprofit. It's amazing. I think it's amazing when people take such a deep and heavy loss and turn it into something that they can use for good.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I think that your platform and telling these stories is incredible. And it's been so amazing for me to go and hear other families to, again, I listened to one woman that you interviewed, that lost her mom and her dad, I think within like a week and a half of each other. And dad, it was kind of expected, but mom, they never thought it was going to happen to her. And to just know that I'm not alone. I mean, obviously by the sheer numbers, you're not alone, but to hear other people's stories or that they had it even worse or whatever, it's just, I really appreciate that you're doing this.
Thank you. Thank you. It's just what my heart is calling me to do. So
yeah, there's so many stories that need to be told. I think you're doing an amazing job.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the show, everyone. If you've lost a loved one to COVID and would like to share your story on the show, please send me an email. My email address is forthosewelostpodcast@gmail.com. This show won't ever have a members area or episodes that you have to pay to listen to, but there are expenses to hosting a podcast, and if you'd like to help, you can support this show at buymeacoffee.com/forthosewelost. The link is in the show notes below. And if you're still listening, and thank you so much if you are, if you like this episode, please share it with your friends, share it on your social media, and once you've done that, please rate and review this show on Apple Podcasts, because that's where most of our new listeners come from. Ratings and reviews are the main way this podcast finds new listeners. So please share the show. Until next time.